your message.
Truth talks, bull walks. Time for some honest talk. The truth will set you free. Rich Stevens Show. See the light. Rich Stevens Show. Rich is right. Crank it up, turn it up. Rich Stevens on your radio. Crank it up, turn it up. Real news coming in stereo. Rich coming to you live. Rich Stevens Show. Yeah. Open your mind. Rich Stevens Show. Yeah. Rich coming to you live.
Here we go. What's going on? It's Rich Stevens. That would be me, your host. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks so much for tuning in wherever you are. I do appreciate it very much. I appreciate the emails, by the way. Some of them, I shouldn't say all of them because that wouldn't be true. Rich, R-I-C-H, at richstevenshow.com. Or if you want to text or leave a voicemail, 305-707-7878. There's a lot of stuff to talk about as usual today. It's going to be a beautiful Thursday here in South Florida, except the heat is still with us. By the weekend, it looks like we're going to have some heavy rain. And there's some interesting things about the winter coming up that I'll tell you in just a bit. But I want to start, this has got to be the big story. The House Republicans, who are loyal to President Trump, brought testimony to the impeachment inquiry to a grinding stop yesterday. Matt Gaetz from Florida and about 30 people walked into a secure room in the Capitol just as Laura Cooper, who's the top Pentagon official overseeing U.S. policy regarding Ukraine, was getting ready to testify. Now, the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, adjourned the hearing. Republicans argued that closed-door testimony is unfair to the president. I was just talking about this yesterday. Now, some of the Republicans brought in cell phones. Remember, this is a secure room. Cell phones are not allowed. And some apparently tweeted from inside, which is, you can't do that ever. And at least one Republican captured video of the people walking in. And according to several reports, Capitol Police had to sweep the room, and Schiff is consulting with the Sergeant at Arms what to do about this. So here's the thing. Granted, if this was me or you, we would be arrested. But how? Because walking into a secure room is a national security breach, by the way. But what kind of security do they have that allow 30 people to walk in to this room? I mean, is there one guy standing there and they were just overpowered? Because the small bits of video that I saw, they weren't being, acting like criminals or anything. All the Democrats had to do from day one is be transparent and then put it to a vote. Instead, they just seem to make up the rules as they go on, and the more it goes on, the more bizarre this whole mishigas is. But I'm more concerned about the secure room at the Capitol, and people were able to breach that secure room. So how secure is it? I'm telling you, when you go to an airport, I don't care what airport you go to today, actually most of them, especially in the bigger cities, you can't get past security. There's a ton of people securing the area where you get your, where you walk through the metal detectors. And yet 30 people or more, we don't have an exact count, were able to walk into this secure room. So it caused a 5-hour delay, 5 hours, because of this Pentagon official who's involved in the Ukraine policy started to testify. This is in the impeachment probe. So she's the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, Laura Cooper. She was supposed to start talking at 10, but the session was delayed because of these lawmakers that some are saying they bum rushed a closed-door meeting. And then they refused to leave. I think this is great. But here's the thing. So after this whole fiasco, and I think the Republicans did something really good. I think this was really good because it just goes to show you that there are things that the Democrats are hiding behind these closed-door testimonies. And if it's all closed-door testimonies, how is the media able to get the opening statements from these people that are testifying? Now, they don't know the line of questioning after that, but they know what they're actually saying. So this is worth talking about. Now, the Democrats later today yesterday rather, they said after all this happened, after the 5-hour delay, that they will eventually hold public hearings, but that's after the initial investigation is all done, when it's all said and done. So all I see is the Democrats continuing to throw our taxpayer dollars away on these bogus investigations, where so far it seems to be just that, because they're coming up with people that are, they continue to, even with the whistleblower, and I got some dirt on the whistleblower coming up too. It's truly amazing to me. And listen, speaking of amazing, in a totally different direction, there's this is very funny. There's a woman in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and she wanted to sell she had an iPhone, I think it was a 6S, and she wanted to sell it to somebody for $100. So she meets the guy, and he handed her a roll of bills. So here's what the bills were. There were two $1 bills. There was a $10 bill, and then there was a fake $1 million bill, because there's no such thing as a $1 million bill. Nothing. So I guess saying fake $1 million bill is kind of redundant, because there is no such thing as a $1 million bill. So anyway, she confronts the guy about the fake bill. What does he do? He punches her, grabs the phone, and took off running. The police are still trying to find this guy. But here's the thing that's kind of funny, is that in several Walmarts around the country, and there was one here in South Florida about 3-4 years ago, people have actually handed the cashier one of these $1 million bills, and I'm sure you've seen these things. It kind of looks real, but not even close. And again, there's no such thing as a $1 million bill. And people actually in Walmart gave people change for the best story I can think of is in Little Rock, Arkansas. This was about 5-6 years ago, and this guy walks in. He bought a bunch of electronics. A ton of stuff. He was with like 3 friends, if I recall the story correctly. And what they did is they loaded up these shopping carts with all these electronics and TVs and everything, and she rang it up, the cashier, and then the guy opens his wallet, takes the $1 million bill out, hands it to her, and it was a tremendous amount. I don't remember what the amount was of the purchase, but the cashier said, "Oh, I've never seen one of these." And he said, "Yeah, they're hard to come by. Not a lot of people have them." But she believed it was real. And she says, "I'm going to have to check with my manager to get change, because I don't have this much change." And the guy that handed her the $1 million bill, she says, "Listen, I'm going to make this day special for you. I'm buying all this stuff for some needy people," which wasn't true, "and I want you to keep the change." And she said, "Oh my God, are you kidding me?" And he said, "No, I want you to keep the change. Take care of your family." And she said, "Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir." And they had, I remember, you might have seen this, they had video, security video of this whole thing going down. There's some people that are just so ridiculously dumb, but I guess you never know, right? It just makes me laugh thinking about it. Who would have the nerve to do that? Well, maybe at a Walmart, you think, because, well, whatever. Listen, we're in a world today where the madness continues to every day surprise. Like that tweet that the president sent the other day comparing the impeachment hearings to a lynching. As I told you my opinion, the first thing I thought of when he said lynching, I was thinking of the Wild Wild West with the cowboys lynching up the bank robbers and criminals, both white and black. So I didn't think anything of slavery whatsoever, except there was a handful of black congresspeople that freaked out over this and were really upset. And that was the big thing the other day. And then remember when we had in the South a few years ago, a couple of years ago now, I guess it is, maybe it's 3 years ago, where they started taking down statues, Confederate statues, and they didn't want this banner hanging up or this monument in front of a courthouse and all this crap. And everybody's giving in to all this stuff. This is our history. They've wiped some of our United States history completely off the map. And I said this back then, whenever it was, 2-3 years ago. I think it was 3. This is just the beginning, and things are going to get worse. And here's one that shows you how bad this madness is out of control. And I don't know where it's going to end, because people continue, our elected officials continue to kowtow to, I guess it's the constituents, or just these mobs of people that just continuously protest. This one, there's a proposal in Massachusetts right now, and they're trying to make it illegal. In other words, you can get arrested if you use the word bitch to demean another person. Now think about that for a minute. So if I'm talking to you, and there's somebody that we were just talking to, and he or she walked away, and you said to me, boy, is she a bitch, you could go to jail for that in Massachusetts if this gets passed through. And I don't see any reason why it wouldn't get passed through, because Massachusetts is one of those states that would pass something. This is something like, I would, to be honest, and I have nothing against people in Vermont, but I think this is something like Bernie Sanders would bring up, and it would come from Vermont. But this is just, it's gone way too far, and it continues to go in a direction that's not healthy for us as Americans, or for that matter, anybody in the world. I mean, if you go, I remember I worked in Savannah, Georgia for a little while, and I can't remember what the name of the statue was, but it was right in the same park where they filmed the movie, I can't think of the name of the movie now. The one with, oh God, Life is Like a Box of Chocolates. Remember that movie? I can't remember what the name is. But anyway, in that particular park, I sat on that bench right where Tom Hanks sat, by the way. And somewhere I got a picture of that. Anyway, there was a statue there in that park about the Confederate Army. And that was one of the many, many statues that was taken down. And every time I hear one of these, and we haven't heard this recently, but every time I saw these stories about taking these statues down, in my mind, I pictured in Iran when they got Saddam Hussein, remember when they were all protesting in the middle of the square there, and they took down that huge statue of him, and they dragged it along? That's what I picture whenever I hear one of these things happening with one of these statues or monuments or whatever you want to call it. But it's definitely gotten out of hand, and it's going to get even worse. And speaking of worse, I have to tell you, and I think I've made myself clear on this, I do believe in climate change. Something has to have affected the way our climates are to have these incredibly high temperatures in the fall and winter and summer, breaking all kinds of records. So there's something going around. But here's the thing. Yesterday, one of the first trials in the U.S. around climate change officially kicked off. Remember ExxonMobil about a year ago, and the New York Attorney General sued ExxonMobil for supposedly lying to its own investors. The case is based on years long, such a long investigation into the company, and they say the trial's going to last about 3 weeks. But apparently, what am I stuttering now? Apparently, climate change regulations could affect its business, because Exxon supposedly had 2 sets of numbers for pricing carbon when taking potential government regulations into account. So investors saw the higher numbers, and ExxonMobil internally held on to the lower numbers, meaning that the investors were being deceived over whether ExxonMobil was a better investment than it may have actually been. Did you get all that? So it's estimated to have cost shareholders, get this, between $476 million and $1.6 billion. That's some spread right there. Now, Exxon is saying, don't look at us, we didn't do anything wrong, and the allegations are politically motivated. Yeah, right. But there's more to the story, because right before the trial started, there was a team of researchers, and they released a new report in complete details how ExxonMobil and the fossil fuel industry knew the dangers of climate change for years. 30, 40 years they knew this, and they tried to cover them up from the public. The same report claims that ExxonMobil spent millions of dollars to try to obscure the scientific reality through these disinformation campaigns. And what they did is they compared it to the tobacco industry trying to hide the negative health effects of smoking. We don't know how that, ended up. But anyway, this case is now being seen as a potential strategy for how to hold fossil fuel companies accountable for climate change, and could set a precedent, of course, for how similar cases are going to play out, after this 3-week trial. And speaking of, big companies like ExxonMobil, yesterday, some big people got fired from their jobs. For example, the head of Boeing's commercial airplanes. Now, he's the first high-level employee to get fired as a result of the scandal over those 2 deadly 737 MAX plane crashes. And he's not the only one who's saying goodbye to his staff. Yesterday, it was announced that the CEOs of Nike and Under Armour are stepping down too, because of all the crap that's gone on with these companies. What happened to General Motors? Remember when General Motors, I think I was talking about this last week, that whole thing with the key fob where your car could just stop when you're in the middle of the highway going 60, 70 miles an hour, and they thought with their attorneys, they worked it out with their board, that it was actually cheaper to pay out the lawsuits, which only turned out to be a dozen or so, where people got killed. It would be cheaper to do that than to spend an extra $1 and replace everybody's key fob that had these specific General Motors cars. Those people never got in trouble for that. But these people, the head of Boeing, he should have stepped down a lot sooner because they knew, and I don't know if you heard about this, but Boeing actually knew that there was a problem with the 737 MAX planes and they could crash, and they allowed these planes to be boarded by people like me and you, and also the crew, and he didn't do anything about it. For the same exact reason, because they didn't think, they kind of waited one side and the other side. Well, everyone's not going to go down, but some might, and of course 2 did. They crashed. And it was all because of this software glitch where the plane all of a sudden took over and they couldn't pull the plane up because it started to dive down. And the main problem was, besides that, is that they didn't train the pilots on how to pull out of this spiral down, which was something that they never knew was part of this software. If they had given the training classes first, apparently, this is what I'm hearing, then it wouldn't have been an issue. But because it happens, and it happened out of nowhere, and long story short, it's good that I think right now, every 737 MAX, United Airlines, Delta, Southwest, they've been all pulled out of service. And remember, they said they were going to have a fix by the end of the month, and that was 6 months ago. Then they said they were going to have a fix by the October 1st. No. Now we're talking, all these airlines are saying, we are not putting these planes back in service. This is not Boeing. These are the specific individual airlines. They're saying they're not going to put these planes back in service till the new year. It amazes me how, and again, I keep saying this, I know I keep saying this, but it's important because what's amazing to me is how many people know things that haven't been caught, and then one day they get caught and they either make up a bunch of lies or they step down in their positions, like with these CEOs. And that's just, it's really scary to me. Here's another thing that's very scary to me. I have a lot of friends that have taken these DNA tests, the Ancestry, and I forget, you and me, or whatever it is, me and you, or something like that, the other one. First of all, if you've never done it, excuse me, you might not know that they're very expensive. I think it's like $100, $200 to do these things. And basically, it's pretty simple. You just, like on Law and Order, you take it comes in a kit with the Q-tip, and you swab the inside of your mouth, and you put it in this tube or plastic thing, bag, whatever. You send it back, and they give you all this information. The problem with this is that information is being held by these companies, which can be subpoenaed for somebody's DNA or a familial match, means somebody in your family, should something come up in a crime, and it doesn't matter when. Now, you would think that these companies, and look, I'm all for catching criminals. I just think this is a major invasion of privacy. And in the past, DNA doesn't lie, we know that. But it could mix up things, and you don't get exactly what you're paying for. Does that make sense? So here's why. The rape and murder of an 18-year-old girl in Wisconsin, get this happened 35 years ago. And it was just solved the other day because police compared DNA to one of these genealogy databases. Tracy Hammerberg was found raped, beaten, and strangled to death. This was on a snow-covered driveway just north of Milwaukee back in December of 1984. It was a brutal death. And it went on unsolved for 35 years, until the Ozaukee County Sheriff's Office revealed that DNA databases is what helped them lead to her killer. Now, something like that is actually good, but it's just the other side where I just, you don't have to be guilty of anything, but it's just, you never know when something gets mixed up, and it's very possible. Speaking of mix-ups, this is a big controversy too in New York City. Remember that guy, the cop that was fired because of the 2014 supposedly chokehold death of Eric Garner? He's now suing the NYPD and their police commissioner, James O'Neill, because he wants his job back. This guy's name is Daniel Pantaleo. I'm sure you remember him. We talked about it numerous times. He filed a lawsuit in Manhattan Civil Court yesterday. He claims that his termination in August of this year was arbitrary and it should not have happened. He was a 13-year vet of the force. He earned about $86,000 a year before being fired from the job. Now, under the rules of his termination, Pantaleo received the money to be paid into his pension while he was employed with the NYPD, but it was decided he would receive no further compensation. Now, if his legal team wins the case, Pantaleo's status will be reinstated to the NYPD, and he'll be paid damages for lost wages. Now, his attorney, Stuart London, he talked to the Post yesterday, and he said that the decision to fire his client was reckless. But here's where it gets interesting. The good old Reverend Al Sharpton hit back, and he said, I'm quoting Al Sharpton now, Pantaleo's decision to seek his reinstatement is not only disrespectful to the police commissioner and NYPD, but also to the Garner family. Remember, this was Eric Garner. If you don't remember the case, he was selling single cigarettes on the street, which is illegal because the person buying them is not paying the taxes. And you see, that's a whole other argument. We could take that up another time. If he bought the cigarettes and split them up, he paid the tax on those cigarettes. So why would he have to collect tax a second time? That doesn't even make sense to me. And I may be missing something on that. I got it, but I don't think I am. It's kind of like when you get taxed from, you get a paycheck and you get taxed, and then you got to pay tax again on the money that you made from something else. It's a little bit weird. So anyway, it was on August 19th that Commissioner O'Neill announced the firing, claiming that Pantaleo could no longer effectively serve as a New York City police officer. And this went on for weeks of deliberation as to whether or not to accept the NYPD Deputy Commissioner of Trials, Rosemary Maldonado, her recommendation that Pantaleo be fired for using a chokehold on Garner that had been banned since 1993. But here's the thing. In this case, remember, and it's very interesting because people that don't know what a chokehold is, and I see you could watch that video and think it's a chokehold, but this is going to bring back some bad memories for me. What's really strange is if you've ever had your throat like totally close up. When I went into anaphylactic shock last year, sorry, this is hard for me to talk about. I was in the ambulance and my throat started to close up, and it was even more difficult to breathe, even with the oxygen. And they were trying to keep me calm, but I couldn't breathe. Now, when you can't breathe, and unfortunately I know this from firsthand experience, when you can't breathe, you can't talk. So Eric Garner, who kept saying, I can't breathe, doesn't make sense, because if they were choking him, he wouldn't have been able to talk. So I hope this I hope Pat DeLeo gets his job back so we can see another controversy with the Reverend Al Sharpton. This is the first time I've actually heard a story where Reverend Al is involved in a very long time. I mean, it's just, this guy needs to go away once and for all. I'll just say 2 words. Tawana Brawley. Give it up already. All right, speaking of giving it up, you know how I don't like how celebrities come out and they endorse people that are running for office, and like people like Amy Schumer, who's Chuck Schumer's niece, I think she is, write this stuff about the president. Well, here's one. This is a new one. Judge Judy has come out and said that the billionaire former New York mayor Michael Bloomberg should run against the, quote, dangerous president Donald Trump. Now, Judge Judy, well, she's the highest paid person on television, by the way. I don't know if you know that or not. But she's a reality star. And in 2015, she said that she was crazy about Trump, but warned that he needed his temper to be toned down, and had issued a final verdict on the president, arguing that only Bloomberg can heal the nation. So after all that sound and fury we experienced in the past 3 years, we need to tone down the rhetoric. And she wrote this in USA Today yesterday. So Bloomberg, who is always talking about the need to avoid acrimony and keep to the center, announced in March that he will not run, although in recent days, supposedly he's been keeping the door open in talks with his associates. Now, the Judge Judy called him an independent, tough-minded businessman who represents our best chance to bring America together again and begin the long national process of healing. Are you kidding me? Really? Judge Judy. Ay, ay, ay. Listen, I wanted to get to that other stuff. I'm going to save it for tomorrow's show. Some of the things, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Listen, if you want to get in touch, it's Rich, R-I-C-H, at richstevenshow.com. By the way, the website has got a complete makeover, richstevenshow.com, if you want to check it out. Or you can just go there and hit the contact form and shoot me a message from there. 305-707-7878 if you want to get in touch as well. And I appreciate you spreading the word about the Rich Stevens Show. I've been getting really amazing feedback, and I appreciate you and love you for it. And thanks for being here. We'll do this thing all over again tomorrow, just for you. This is the Rich Stevens Show.